My dad was Eric Garner. I just miss him a lot. I do.
Nearly 6 years after Eric Garner cried out his last words, dying in a banned police chokehold, George Floyd uttered the same phrase.
I can't breathe.
Seen taking his last breath in the now widely circulated video under the knee of former officer Derek Chauvin, charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. While Floyd's case is just beginning, some are pointing to the outcome of others, from Eric Garner to Rodney King, as to what may lie ahead.
Winning a conviction will be hard. History does show that there are clear challenges here.
In the court of public opinion, Derek Chauvin's fate may already be decided. The outcome, though, is far from certain when it comes to weighing his guilt or innocence in the court of law.
You have to meet such a high hurdle in order to hold them responsible criminally that most often you're going to see a police officer walk out of that courtroom and not suffer a guilty verdict. And we see that time and time again across the country.
Brett Tolman worked several years as a career prosecutor. As U.S. Attorney in Utah, he successfully tried Elizabeth Smart's kidnappers. Now, Tolman is building on reforms he pushed through in the First Step Act.
Reducing crime and raising standards are not opposite goals.
Tolman says he views congressional proposals and President Trump's executive order as a starting point.
They have good measures in them for helping police officers respond better, but there's not a lot in there in terms of holding them accountable when they don't do what they're supposed to or they do something wrong.
Go inside now! Get in the house!
And when we say wrong, I'm talking about criminal acts. And police officers do commit criminal acts.
Statistics back that up. According to one database tracker, police killed nearly 1,100 people in 2019. And of all the 7,600 police-related homicides in the previous 6 years, 99% resulted in no charges.
John, it's amazing because I know of some dedicated prosecutors who've really tried to hold some police officers accountable, but they run into hurdles.
Brent Orrell, who worked on criminal justice reform for President George W. Bush, says one of the obstacles is that prosecutors are dependent upon the police.
There's an intimate relationship between police and prosecutors that I think sometimes gets too cozy. And prosecutors don't want to hamper future investigations and future prosecutions.
As someone who worked inside the system, Tolman agrees.
You're in a way asking the fox to, take care of the henhouse.
Duffy Stone, head of the country's largest association of prosecutors, doesn't see it that way.
I prosecuted police officers. I have prosecuted public officials. And you do that because that is the job that you signed up for.
Stone blames the lack of clearly defined laws on excessive use of force and criminal penalties for the lack of convictions.
Talking to a number of district attorneys who have made charges against police officers, that's been one of the things that have slowed them down. It's not a question of whether or not they're going to charge the officer criminally. It's with what?
That question made it difficult to try the case against former officer Michael Slager in the 2015 shooting death of Walter Scott.
The difficulty comes in the definition of murder in South Carolina. We don't have varying degrees of murder. So putting it into that box of malice is a burden that is often difficult here in South Carolina and probably in other parts of the country as well.
Scarlett Wilson, who also prosecuted the Charleston church massacre, says clearly defined laws would benefit juries as well.
Because we don't have that, it makes it more difficult for juries to understand. It makes it difficult for prosecutors and defense attorneys and even officers as well. The fact of the matter is, most of the time, police do act appropriately.
Orrell says another consideration is the public's hesitation to convict.
We want to believe the best about our police forces, and what that leads to is that sort of unquestioning support for police action is a kind of reflexive, the officer is not at fault and the person who was injured or killed did something to bring that upon themselves.
And then there's the influence of unions, which critics say protects and keeps bad cops employed.
I'm aware of many cases, John, where it's obvious to anybody that this was a crime, and the prosecution was powerless to really investigate the case because of the strength of the unions.
Years of simmering mistrust have led to drastic demands, exposing a divide in the broad spectrum, now calling for change.
The American people do not want their police forces defunded. They want them reformed. And that's where we need to focus our time and energy.
While the overwhelming majority of police interactions with the public are peaceful, this drive for reform doesn't appear to be dying down.
George Floyd is a case that certainly deserved attention, and it deserved to be the catalyst to set off reform that's very necessary. He didn't have to die. It was a minor violation that they were responding to.
Those pushing for change say all of those factors taken together, along with Supreme Court rulings affirming police protections, tilt the scales of justice, making it harder to hold police misconduct to account. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.